Greetings, wrestling fans, and welcome to Fannin's Flashbacks, the podcast that nobody asked for, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. This podcast is going to cover tales from IWA Mid South during my 12 years with the company, and it will be a part of the VNMVS Podcast Network. This podcast is intended for mature audiences only due to the foul language and graphic details about deathmatch wrestling that it will contain. This will be your backstage pass to get a peek behind the curtain at what led to the downfall of the craziest independent wrestling promotion of the late 1990s, early 2000s. And without any further ado, Nick Manawa, hit the music. Greetings, wrestling fans, and welcome to episode 4 of Fannin's Flashbacks. It's the podcast nobody asked for, but I decided to give it to you anyway. These are tales from my time in IWA Mid South from 1997 to 2009, and I am joined today by my longtime friend Les Johns, whom is the man most responsible for me becoming involved in the professional wrestling business. So everybody that hates me, you can blame Les Johns. All right. And if you've watched or listened to episode 1 of Fannin's Flashbacks, then you know that Les was supposed to be on that very first episode, but he couldn't make it, living up to the IWA by having a no-show on that first episode. So he finally joins us today, and go back and listen to that first episode because it's the perfect companion piece to what this episode will be. Because as you're listening to this, if you listen the day that it will drop, it will be the 28th anniversary of Les Johns, Ben Rich, and Jim Fannin getting into the wrestling business with that very first show in Lexington, Kentucky. How you doing today, Les?
I'm doing well. Just got back from Johnson City and Bristol, where I headed out to cover the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, play an exhibition game against East Tennessee State University. For those who don't know, I'm a sports writer that covers Wake Forest athletics. I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And obviously, me and Jim were college buddies back at the University of Kentucky. Before we really get going, though, Jim, I want to give you kudos for a couple things. First of all, I've listened to episode 1 and 3. The podcast is great. I mean, just fantastic. I love that you're doing it. I think you're doing a great job with it, and you're just navigating these interviews excellently. So kudos for that. The other thing I've noticed recently is you do a fantastic job on your social media of touting the work that your friends are doing all across the nation. You know, regardless of what avenue they're in or what they're doing, you're consistently promoting them. And when I think about ways to describe you, if I was to come up with like a list of adjectives, towards the top would be loyal. And you can really see that loyalty shine through in the way you take care of your friends. And I think that's really commendable. So, good job on both those things.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And what I got from that was that you, for some reason, do not like Brent Blades, but that's okay.
I just haven't had time yet to listen to Brett. I listened to Kickboxer on the way back from Bristol, and I did notice that with me coming on now, there's zero chance I will be as profound as the American Kickboxer, but I also probably won't be as profane as Ben Rich. So, like, somewhere between those two.
Somewhere, okay. There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, because we run the disclaimer at the beginning of this that says, there's going to be some vulgar language. There's going to be some adult themes that are discussed on here with the style of wrestling that IWA presented. So, we can get as raunchy as we need to get, and talking about American Kickboxer, that podcast just blew me away. I had no idea what to expect going into that, because as I had mentioned, as me and Kickboxer mentioned on when I was on his podcast, and then when he was on my podcast, we might have said 8 words total to each other in 9 years of being on shows beyond hi. And, when we would see each other, like first walk into the building, we just had no interactions really whatsoever. And, we would be joking on, so, talking in our messaging and whatever, sitting there going, is this podcast going to go longer than 20 minutes? What are you going to be able to talk about? And, and it was by
He's
far
got a lot going on.
he's got a lot going on. And there, the amount of stuff that we ended up having in common when I started talking to him and things, it just surprised me. And before I knew it, we were at like 2 hours, and I was like, oh my God, we should end this. I don't, no one's going to listen to me that long. So, that
It
probably
was all
it
entertaining.
took,
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I came for the backstory on him and Tarek, but I learned so much more, and I was really surprised at some of his very, like I said, profound, uplifting messages, and the way he's kind of evolved his life since getting out of the ring. It's a great listen. If you haven't listened yet, you really ought to go back and stop listening to me and go listen to American Kickboxer.
well, and I told you, Ben, I told Nick Manawa, I told Rich Wayne, like everybody was, reaching out as soon as they knew that I had finished the recording, and they were like, well, how did it go? Because everybody was like legitimately worried that, you know, with the way I am and how antisocial I am and everything else, they're like, you have nothing to fall back on, as past memories really to just fall into. And they were worried about whether I'd be able to actually do the interview with Kickboxer. They were like, how was it? And all I can talk about afterwards was that answer he gave on the acknowledge and gratitude thing, and it just totally blew my mind. And I think I said to all of you guys, like, that should have been the end of the podcast. Should have ended on that note, but it was like at the halfway point. And then we even thought about like trying to make Nick Manawa have to edit it to put it at the end. And we were like, well, we ended with Tracy Smothers, so that ended up being a good ending. So we
And
just left it.
what was great about that was I didn't have anywhere near the interactions with Tracy that you folks did. And the stories you all told just they put a smile on my face. And I didn't really know Tracy personally at all. So yeah, for someone who wasn't connected to him, it still was just really great stories. And I can feel you all's admiration and love for Tracy through those stories.
Yeah, Tracy and Chris Candido were very special people in my life and in everybody's life that they touched in that IWA locker room. And losing those two were tough. I mean, it was a long time between them. 15 years between each one, but um, it was it was definitely hard to lose those folks, and they had given so much and done so much and provided so much material story wise. I was glad to see that Tracy got to do a book. I've yet to actually be able to every year I put it on my wish list for Christmas because the in-laws will ask me, what do I want? And I mean, they don't really know what to get me. I'm from a completely different universe than what they're used to. So I always give them an Amazon wish list, and every year the Tracy Smothers book is on there, and it hasn't been gotten yet. So maybe this is the year. But I was actually involved in providing some stories and stuff for Chris's Candido's book. So that was special to me. I've got that, read the book, and then I put it in my keepsake collector chest of memories and stuff that I've got. But those two were definitely very important people in a lot of lives with what they provided. And you know, it's it's hard to do justice to either one. It's no matter how many good things you say, it'll never really be enough for those guys. And so yeah, it was a blast to get to hear Kickboxer tell his story, and then to get to tell some of mine about Tracy. That was a lot of fun. Um,
Speaking of Chris and Tracy, it just sparked in my mind. and I know you've probably pondered this many times before, the amount of top level talent that made their way through IWA at one time or another. I mean, you could build, if you take those guys at their prime, you could build a big time pay-per-view out of those names. I mean, you really could when you talk. It's just from beginning to end. There's so much talent that came through either most of the time a little bit on the back end of their careers or on the early part of their careers, usually. Yeah, it was a bit of an amazing spot for pro wrestling for that period of time.
Yeah, and one of the first things that we saw, and we'll get into more of a timeline later, but one of the first things we saw going to IWA Mid South was the Terry Funk versus Tracy Smothers at the bar, like the night before the Doug Gilbert Memorial
Yeah.
Show, and Tracy, until the last time I saw him, Tracy would always talk about that match, and he'd be like, "Man, I was fighting for my life, man. I told Terry Funk that the T stood for Tennessee instead of Texas, and he tried to kill me, man.
They
He
fought
tried
all
to
around the
kill me."
bar, didn't they?
Oh, they fought
They
everywhere,
fought everywhere.
and they were like, Funk like was throwing the shot glasses from the bar off of Tracy's head, and like Tracy was like, "He tried to kill me, man. Don't ever tell Terry Funk that Tennessee's better than Texas, man. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's like Beirut out there with him, man. Don't do it." And and yeah, the amount of talent and what I eventually got to, I got to work with Terry Funk. I got to work with Dusty Rhodes, Chris Candido, Tracy Smothers. I got to manage CM Punk, Chris here, like, the amount of guys that either, like you said, were towards the tail end of their career and coming off major company runs, or the guys that were working their way, like, we were double A baseball, and then they were going to move on to Ring of Honor, and then up into AW, WWE, TNA, whatever. The amount of talent that came through IWA was just something spectacular.
Did AJ Styles ever work a show?
Oh, AJ Styles worked a ton of
Is
shows.
that
Yeah,
right? I did not
yeah,
know that.
he was one of the ones that I would have to drive around um, when Ian would, because at that point, like, Ian would try to run like a quad shot around the state of Indiana so he could like maximize the effort, and the guys would lower their fee, and be like, "Oh, well, if you're going to use me Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday," and we'd do like Evansville, Salem, Bloomington, Highland, or something along the way, and trying to like having a van. I'd use my grandmother's van so I could pick everybody up from the airport and then just drive them all over the place. So there was times where it was like AJ Styles, Abyss, Chris Candido, Super Dragon, me, and I think like Steve Stone. Um, and there might have been somebody else, but we were on like one of those quad shots, and Super Dragon, I think, said 3 words in 4 days. And so like everybody would just give him so much shit and pick on him the whole ride. And you know, it was like Candido would be like, "Hey man, he's just shy. Leave him alone. He's just shy. He's and I think Candido was scared of him because Super Dragon would, that curb stomp is probably one of my all-time favorite moves. And if I had to make a list of people that I never managed during their time in IWA that I wish I could have, Super Dragon would be right at the top of that list. Definitely in the top two or three. Because I just absolutely loved that curb stomp. But yeah, AJ Styles was in quite often. I think he even won one of the TPIs. I forget which year it was. It might have been like '05, I think. But yeah, won he won TPI one year, and I think he was like runner up or something. And one of them he might have been. I think it might have been the '04 final. I think that was something like AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and um, who was it? I'm blanking, but it was American Dragon. It was like American Dragon, Samoa Joe, and AJ Styles, and then like I think it was WWE ran that match once,
Oh
and
wow.
and everybody was like, "Hey, look, it's the rematch of the 2004 TPI," and and it was just just amazing as to the amount of talent that had come through. So um, before we really dive though into the IWA stuff, there's some pre IWA things that I'd really like to get to that helped bond our friendship and led the way to IWA. But let's just start off with what had made you a wrestling fan to begin with when you were growing up.
I would say the staple for me probably was Memphis wrestling that was on Wave 3 out of Louisville. We lived in rural Kentucky, in a trailer on like 3 acres of land in Meade County. Brandenburg was the big city in Meade County.
Big city.
Yeah, it's kind of like between Louisville and Elizabethtown on the map is where Meade County is. Um, and yeah, I got kind of hooked on Channel 3 wrestling. That's what I always just called it, Channel 3 wrestling. Lance Russell, Dave Brown, Jerry Lawler, the Jarrett promotion stuff. And then slowly started integrating myself to WWE Superstars, which I think was the only WWF Superstars. I think might have been the only WWF show that we had at the time. And then eventually, thankfully, I found NWA and worldwide was on one of the stations. I can't say that obviously, but and it was on one of the local stations. Um, I did not have cable or satellite, so I never got the Saturday 6:05 program that everybody loved. Actually, there's a lot I didn't get, but I saw enough of NWA and Memphis to get hooked. Um, my dad, unlike yours, was not a wrestling fan, but as a young child and a young teenager or whatever, I did drag him to a handful of shows, at the Louisville Gardens, for instance. I remember one time. It was either an ICW show or an ICW adjacent show that was in an even smaller town in Meade County called Flaherty. Flaherty is, of course, best known as the only city in America in which my wife got a speeding ticket ever. She was on her way from Elizabethtown to Meade County to see me, and she was in such a hurry that she got her only speeding ticket in her life. So,
I think
uh,
that's on the welcome to Flaherty sign
I
when
think
you
so.
enter town. Yeah.
I think so. So there's two memories I have of the ICW show in Flaherty, which very well could have been my first show. One was I remember Bob Roop was there and he was doing that gimmick where he puts in his finishing hold, which is it's sort of like the master lock or whatever, but it's sitting down. I don't know if there's a name for it. I'm sure there is. But there's this challenge. If you can escape it, you win X amount of dollars. The other thing I remember, sadly enough, is that I really needed to use the restroom, and I went wandering off by myself, and I asked around. It wasn't apparently obvious where it was, and I was a kid, so I wandered into the locker room, and I saw a buck naked Bob Orton Sr. I saw his ass. I saw Bob Orton's ass as a kid, so forever scarred from that. So in terms of what I like, it became quickly NWA, then WCW. Never really had a lot of affinity for WWE, as you said in a couple of years already. Just too cartoony. Um, Obviously, once Flair was there, and the Royal Rumble was fantastic, and I followed Flair's journey there. Um, and there's been periods of time in which they've augmented or focused on the wrestling but it's in their history, it's few and far between. It's more been a story, a show, having moments than having good wrestling. Um, and the NWA quickly became Four Horsemen and Ric Flair fans. Um, we were there in Nashville, I believe it was, when he won the
Oh,
title.
I've got that on my list to talk
Yeah,
about.
we'll
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit later then. So I did go. I did go to a WWF TV taping the day Yokozuna debuted. I remember because he had a couple squash matches. That I mean, it was like his introduction, so that was, I guess, kind of cool. Um, we both. You probably have this on your list already. Do you have Milwaukee on the list?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. uh, so, trying to think what else I saw as a child. I conned my dad into going with me to one of the big combination AWA Memphis world class shows, but it wasn't the one in which Lawler beat Kerry Von Erich because he bled. I think it was like it was one leading up to that, if I recall. So they were doing TV and there was like 25 matches on the card. Um, so that was a lot of fun for me, but not for my dad because he spent most of his time out in the lobby smoking or whatever. So, yeah, I can't think of what else to talk about in terms of what. Now I am a big AEW fan. I don't watch a second of WWE. I think the last time I watched a match for them was when Cody Rhodes wrestled with a torn pec, and I just happened to throw it on to see the spectacle of that. Um, but yeah, I watch a lot of AEW, Dynamite, sometimes Collision, and then I usually watch the pay-per-views because there's so much good wrestling on them. So yeah, the pay-per-views are kind of, if you care at all about modern wrestling, AEW pay-per-views are the top thing you should be watching. Um, what else? What am I leaving out?
I think that's probably a good segue to get into what I had next on my list of things to get into. Because like me and Ben Rich had already gone over pretty much how we met. Um, with it being the University of Kentucky, and I think I told the story the way I remembered it. We were at a club that none of us are a part of anymore. Um, you know, th- the
Thankfully, yeah.
thankfully, but you and him were like had obviously met before and were like horse playing and doing like backyardy wrestling type stuff while stuff was going on. And then I was like, hey, wait a minute, are you guys wrestling fans? And we ended up, becoming thick as thieves after that point, always hanging out. And one of the things that, impressed me when we first met and I first got over to your house was your closet full of wrestling tapes. And it looked like you had just about every wrestling show that you had watched on tape. And it was like you had like all of the you said when you were littler you didn't have the cable, you didn't have access to TBS, but yet you did have all of these Saturday night shows where you must have gotten it at some point, and then you had them all in like order on VHS tape. And
Think I've still got all those tapes.
okay,
I
all
think I
right,
said, do they actually work? I do not know.
okay.
Is it all available digitally now? Probably.
I would think it most of it probably is, but the thing that I bring this up because it's something that we still joke about to this day. And so I want to actually get it onto podcast for other people to hear. And as soon as I start, you probably already know where I'm heading with this,
I've got
but
one thing in my head.
if not, it'll become apparent. So as I said, we're watching this, in order. And it had to have been 88, maybe 89 timeline, as far as when this was recorded. And Lex Luger is giving a promo and and he says how many allocades he has. And we're like, what? And then the very next week, the next show on the tape,
Jim Cornette.
Jim Cornette is, going on and on about all of his allocades. And it was either Shivani or Jim Ross. Like maybe that was when Shivani had went to WWE, and so maybe it was Jim Ross. But whoever was like, Cornette, don't you mean accolades? And Cornette's like, I know that. You know that. Everybody at home knows that. Lex Luger doesn't know that.
That did just kind of like put a bow on the whole thing, right?
Oh, and it was fantastic. And if you hadn't had it all, in order, and we hadn't just been watching it in order, and you just randomly came upon that, you'd be like, well, what is he even talking about? But the
Yeah.
fact that, and I wish I could remember the exact dates on that and tell everybody you need to go look this up. But it did happen. Lex Luger said allocades, and then Jim Cornette, and I think he even did it a couple more times as we were watching those tapes, and he would just let Luger have it every time. And so we will still, like me, you, and Ben, whenever we're like talking about, oh, past championships or whatever, it would be like, name those allocades for us,
My record, and I don't remember what he said, but I saw Lex Luger at the Raleigh Galaxy Con, and I tried to ask him about that, but he didn't seem to really know what I was getting at. So, and I know he's been through a lot, so I wasn't going to give him grief. And Lex Luger had a really nice career, and yeah, he had a lot of impact in both federations, and he was one of those big guys that could actually wrestle some. He had the look. He had the charisma. Obviously, didn't always say exactly the right things, but um, I guess you could say he was the total package. But yeah, he had a really nice guy. I didn't want to pick on him at all. So I know he's struggled of late.
Yeah, I mean, he was not great
No, but he
inside the
wasn't
ring, but
terrible.
he wasn't terrible. He had great matches with Steamboat. He had great matches with Flair. I loved his matches with Stan Hansen over the U.S. title. He had some good stuff. But the one thing that will always stand out to me, other than allocades, the other thing about Lex Luger that I absolutely loved was that run that he did with Sting on in WCW, where they were a tag team, and every single time Sting would be paying attention, Luger was over the top babyface, slapping hands, loving everybody, kissing babies. And as soon as Sting turned around and wasn't looking anymore, then Luger was like
A rule
threatening,
breaker.
threatening to hit somebody. He was cheating. He would like duck underneath Sting and then stand in front of him and pose to the camera on the entrance and everything. That was perfection. And then NWO came along and they just completely dropped that storyline. And it was like, oh, I wanted to see that. That was
The one
so
thing I
good.
the one thing I will say about Luger's career is, especially in NWA, WCW, is he did flip between heel and face way too often. But I understand hot shotting things to try to build the house and that kind of stuff. So I mean, it's no big deal.
Yeah. So that was always good stuff. And the other thing that I have that I wanted to like get into before we start going through certain timelines and stuff was the Rampage wrestling game. And we spent I don't even think we could put into out, and get an accurate amount of hours that we spent playing that Rampage wrestling game on your computer. And then you gave me the files so I could put it on my computer. And then me and Chris played that thing when I would go home during the summer, when classes weren't going on at University of Kentucky. That me and Chris would just every night till the wee hours of the morning. We'd just be sitting there playing, booking our own
I was
cards.
about to say, and we
And
wouldn't just play out the matches, we would book around them too. And then that was one of the ones where you didn't really control the winners and losers. So then you would
right,
have to kind of book around whatever the computer spit out, even if it spit out like a 12-second DQ of something you had scheduled to be like the main event. Like, oh crap, what am I going to do now?
right.
So
Yeah,
then
so
you had to book yourself around all that.
it was a great game.
I know I take a peek at it every once. It's on my computer now, and it's probably been a couple of years since I tinkered with it. I almost said tinkled, but anyway. But anyway, yeah, it's something I could randomly pick up again tomorrow and start messing around with.
Yeah, I don't think
The thing
I don't
out
think I've
the,
got it anymore.
the thing when you were talking about tapes though at first, I thought you were going to mention was I don't remember where we were headed, and it doesn't really matter. We were in your Jeep, your green Jeep or whatever, olive Jeep or whatever, and we hadn't left the house there on a city called on a street called Kilrush in Lexington, Kentucky, and I looked down at your cassette tapes. That was really kind of before CDs, and I looked down and you have like a tape that you had put together yourself. I guess they would call it like a mixtape now. And it literally said the Beat Less Collection. BEAT space capital LES collection. And I'm like, what the hell's this, Jim? What is this? And you're like, and you just started laughing your ass off and like I'm like, what is it? And you're like, Les, it's the Beatles.
Yeah, there was no space. There was no space.
It definitely was a capital L
It
though.
was a capital L because the way I had wrote it at first, it looked like an I, so I made it a capital to, just so I wouldn't be looking at it one day and be like, you know, what is the Beaties? So I made it a capital L, and yes, you thought I had the Beatless collection, and yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even know what that would have been,
I
but
guess it would be like hype music to get ready to take me on in some endeavor,
okay.
whether it be in the ring or on the basketball court or something,
Well, it would
or a
have been
rampage.
or ramp. It would have been very fitting if it was when we were driving to go to that ring rental that I'm going to bring up in a little bit.
Are we
Um,
going to are we going to leave the guilty unnamed on that one?
Statute of limitations is probably up, so we got to tell the story, but we'll still leave the names out, so just in case they can't come after him.
Yeah.
Um, but you had started to mention, and it was next on my list, so we'll talk about it now. Starrcade 1995 was probably the first big show that we had went to together after we had met each other in the fall of 95. Then we decided to go to Starrcade 95, and that was one of the most fun trips I think I've ever had. It was my best friend Chris, been friends since we were 5 years old. You and me. So me and Chris drove down from Morris, Illinois, to Lexington, and then we left and drove to Nashville and went to Starrcade, and we just acted a fool that whole show. Um, as you mentioned, you were a huge Ric Flair fan. I was a huge Ric Flair fan. Chris was a huge Ric Flair fan. And we went to that show probably between the three of us. We probably thought that there was a -8% chance that Flair was going to win the title that night. So then, when he dumped Sting and Luger over the top rope in the three-way match where the winner got the title shot, I think we jumped up and was like, 1, 2, 10, 1, 2, 10, it's done, and trying to get the count out to happen quicker. And then when I guess it was the main event, when he's wrestling Savage for the title, the guy behind us kept telling us to shut up,
Oh,
and that Elizabeth was going to turn on Flair and get back with Savage for Savage to keep the title. And the more he said it, the more I was like, damn it, that's something that they would do. I was like, uh, Savage is buddies with Hogan. Hogan would never lose. Savage is probably not going to lose. Damn it, they'd probably do something like that. And so I I was starting to feel like, oh, we're not going to see this. So then when he actually won that title, the three of us, I think, jumped through the roof of that
we
place.
lost our minds. Yeah.
I don't think I've popped harder at anything except for maybe when Freebird hit at the second Eddie Gilbert Memorial, and you knew who was coming out, but I didn't, and lost my mind. I was hoping it was Michael Hayes, but I was just as happy that it was Terry Gordy
Yeah.
when he came out. But those were probably 1A and 1B for the most I've ever popped, at an event. And we ended up enjoying ourselves. Before moving on, do you have anything that you wanted to add about
No, I
Starrcade
don't remember
95?
much about that show.
Because wasn't that where they had it was like the New Japan guys
Worlds
versus
Collide or
the
something
Worlds
like that.
Collide or
Yeah.
something like that? And
If I recall correctly, there was a couple of really good undercard matches. Um, and then, of course, there was you had to win something to get to the main event, and Flair won that and then beat Savage. And I know we lost our mind. I just now remembered, and I said I didn't watch a whole lot of WWF product, but because Flair was involved, I got interested in that 92 era. And the day they went on sale, I bought a front row ticket to WrestleMania 8 in Indianapolis. And front row tickets then weren't like billions of dollars like they are now. Uh, I say front row, it was like a second or third row. And then I ended up somehow my seat was removed or obstructed or something. So they gave me another seat. I'm like right behind Reba McEntire as she gets up to sing the national anthem. And you can also see me vividly, very young me, when the Piper, who's Piper work? It's a really good match anyway, but you can see me in that brawl around the ring. But I saw Savage and Hogan wrestle that night too, unfortunately, because when I bought the ticket, I was a billion percent sure the main event was going to be Hogan and Flair in the main event, basically for the first time on a big show for the world title. But they completely, in my mind, botched that booking. And anyway, it became like a double main event, and I wasn't super happy about that. So
okay, so we'll move on from Starrcade 95 to Starrcade 96. We decided to go back to Nashville the next year for Starrcade 96.
is that the one where there was a Nitro the next day in Chattanooga or
Yes,
something? Okay.
yes. And then we went to the Starrcade, and I think that ended up being the Starrcade where Piper beat Hogan with the sleeper hold.
Yeah, with the fan run in.
Yeah, and then we went to the Nitro the next night. And what I remember from that Nitro the next night was, you had talked about how much Luger flipped between heel and babyface.
Oh,
The guy that could rival him was the Big Show or the Giant, Paul White, whatever you want to call him. And at Starrcade, the Giant was in the NWO. And when we got to the Nitro the next night, as we're coming in, they're hyping all of the Giant NWO t-shirts are on sale. And it was like 50% off, you know, get your Giant NWO t-shirts. And then around the first match, we had went to go to the bathroom and they were pulling all of the shirts off of the table and boxing them up and getting rid of them. And then we were like, okay, well, we know what's coming. And then, we go back in and sure enough, you know, um, Paul White's, the Giant is no longer in the NWO. And we're like, well, you know, you maybe could have like not given it away to everybody by, with the t-shirt stuff going on, but I don't know how many people were really, paying that close of attention like we were at that. But we were so avid with everything that we were we were
Pick up
paying
the
attention to
intricacies. Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And do you remember anything else about the Starrcade Nitro other than
Didn't my nephew Chris go with us on that show, on that trip?
maybe
It
maybe
seems to me
I
that
know
even
my friend Chris didn't. I know that Chris did.
it seems like you were riding like in the back of some sedan or something. And is that when you like started singing on top of Old Smoky because there's a cop and then my nephew Chris made an illegal move on the not listening to you at all?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, you're back there randomly singing on top of Old Smoky, and because there's one right there on top of us, and then Chris makes an illegal U-turn or something, or yeah, you're like, "Damn it! I tried to tell you."
I mean, other than just saying, "Hey, there's a cop behind us," which would have been much easier. The way that I operate is, I got to do it my own way and sing on top of Old Smoky.
All right, Frank Sinatra.
Yeah. But like right around that time was when I had moved into your basement, was like during that summer fall, and we had ended up going to the 1996 SEC basketball
Oh yeah,
tournament in Atlanta.
such a
Uh,
great team.
and then we ended up doing even going to the Final Four in Indianapolis, which was a unhappy ending. But you by me living in your basement, you got to get a unique perspective as to what makes me tick, and I will let you tell some of your stories that you like so much when telling people, you know, exactly what kind of how difficult I can be, and just how rigid I am with my rules.
Yeah,
And
you do have a lot of rules. The one that in terms of that kind of pops out to me, actually, I think happened on one of those trips to Tennessee, and we were dining together at the Hard Rock Cafe, if memory serves, in downtown Nashville. And it seems to me my wife was there, so I'm thinking it was a second trip because I think Paula made the trip with us, my wife Paula, and Chris made the trip, and that's why there were so many people in the car where you were like, anyway. So, you ordered, was it chili? And,
yes,
and in the chili, in this big ass bowl of chili that Jim ordered, they had sprinkled in some tortilla chips. Well, heaven forbid, some of the tortilla chips were colored. Some were blue, some were red, some were the normal, like pasty white or whatever, you know. Jim didn't just like take the chips out that offended him. To him, that ruined the entire meal. Not really just for him, but for all the rest of us as well. Because he ranted and raved the rest of the afternoon at the Hard Rock Cafe. I'm sure he sent, I don't know if he sent it back. I don't know if he ate. And I'm not sure if we ate. But it was a pretty miserable experience at the Hard Rock Cafe. What did I miss?
that about sums that one up. I had written down, colored tortilla chips. Um,
You know, but then there's
to
other
remind me.
cases where he has a stomach of lead.
And if I could, I'm going to share my screen for a moment just to show how much that we are thinking alike here. So you're going to share. See right here, colored tortilla chips and macaroni.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, so
So tell the
Paula,
macaroni.
so Paula, if you're listening, just fast forward a couple minutes because she doesn't like me telling this story, and you'll see why, or you'll hear why. So Jim goes back home on a school weekend, if memory serves, to Morris for the weekend. I don't remember if he took my son Adam with him on this trip or if it's some other trip. I think it's some other trip. But he's gone like all day Friday, all day Saturday, gets back Sunday. Early in the weekend, I think on Friday, my wife cooks some would call it spaghetti, some would call it goulash. It basically is like spaghetti, but with elbow macaroni and a meat sauce. Um, Very tasty. She doesn't like it like that anymore. I still make it, think it's the best. So it was made on Friday, and we were bad people and did not put it away in the fridge when we were done, and it just sat on the stovetop. Well, Jim gets home Sunday night, and we're already in bed. And he decides that the macaroni pasta on the stovetop looked pretty yummy and decided to devour the rest of it. So we get up like Monday morning and realize all the pasta was gone that had been, clearly contaminated from being out, in the room temperature for like 72 hours and figured our friend was about to die. So, from food poisoning, but he survived. He survived that, but could not survive a red tortilla chip.
Well, I like goulash. I don't like things that are colors that they're not supposed to be. A tortilla chip is a yellow corn tortilla chip. They're not red, they're not blue, they're not black, they're not green. One color. That's what they are. And if you stray from that, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. And if you put a pickle on my plate, nothing on that plate is going to get touched. It's going to all go into the garbage because it's all contaminated by the pickle juice. Get the fucking pickle off my plate. And I specifically do a 10-minute diatribe to a wait. If I'm going somewhere for the first time, which rarely happens, because when a place shows me that they can do it right, that's where I go. And I have nothing but trouble with my food rules. So I try not to go to new places. But if I go to a new place,
I can
I
kind of
gotta tell
understand the
them,
pickle rule though, because it actually, pickles have juice. You can't put a
right,
pickle on something and not have it. Yeah, I get it. I understand. I understand that.
okay,
Not that you need my blessing for your rules.
no, but at least somebody can finally say that they see where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got the food stories out, but now we're going to go into, you had alluded to it earlier, that King of the Ring 1996. Me, you, and my buddy Chris go to Milwaukee, Wisconsin for this WWF pay-per-view. And what did I do?
You left about a quarter to a third of the way through, and I don't even remember now what set you off. You're going to have to remind me of that. But the thing that's interesting about that is that's the King of the Ring in which Austin 316 was launched after he defeated Jake the Snake Roberts in the final. So yeah, that's the first time he uttered those words that I remember. I think that's the way history records it. Jim Fannin missed the, introduction of a phrase that took pro wrestling by storm because he left early because he didn't like something he saw in the ring instead of just like, ignoring it and moving on.
Yeah, well,
What was
the
it? I can't
selling,
remember.
well, the selling,
It was a winner, right? It was someone won that you thought
yes,
was ridiculous.
when Jake Roberts beat Vader,
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I understand that.
when because
I understand the dismay.
I wanted Vader to win. The only other thing that I went to watch was Sunny as a cowgirl managing the smoking guns. They gave me that in the very first match. I had absolutely zero interest in seeing the Ultimate Warrior versus Gold Dust. Wanted nothing to do with watching that match. I'd rather you fling me off the top of the Sears Tower than make me watch an Ultimate Warrior match. So I wasn't going to do it. And since Vader was eliminated and they had Jake Roberts was doing that bullshit, holier than thou, born again Christian preacher gimmick, you know, and if you want to believe that there's an invisible man floating in the sky, impregnating virgins, and his son, becoming a zombie and rising from the dead, and all this other bullshit, make believe fairy tale crap, fine. But don't throw it at me and try to make me, think that you're a great person because you're an idiot and believe that stuff. I don't want to hear it, you know? And when Big Van Vader could have killed that version of Jake Roberts in 30 seconds if he wanted to, and I got to watch a stumbling, bumbling, fumbling Jake Roberts somehow beat Big Van Vader. And,
was it a pinfall or DQ, or do you remember?
I can't remember. I just remember that, I got disgusted. Neither one of you guys wanted to leave. So I just went and sat in the car.
What'd you do? I mean, we didn't have cell phones at that point in time, right?
I sat in the car. I just sat in the car.
There's one thing you talked briefly about the Final Four in Indianapolis, and one thing I wanted to add to that was, as we left the Final Four matchups, we both procured tickets for friends for the championship game against Arizona. Who did you get in? I forgot.
Was my uncle.
Your uncle. What's his name? I don't remember.
Not important.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got a ticket from my brother Edward. And once again, this is in 1996. We didn't have cell phones. So as we left the Hoosier Dome at the time, we stopped at a gas station, used a payphone to call my brother Ed, and who had asked me to get him a Final Four program. And so I called him to tell him that I did not get his Final Four program. He goes, "Why didn't you get it for me?" I said, "Well, you can get your own self." He goes, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I've got you a ticket to the championship game." So if I remember correctly, they had tickets some other random place in the building. We had tickets in the student section, and we got them both to join us in our standing room row in the student section, if I remember correctly. So that's my recollection. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool experience, I thought. Also a shame the Cats didn't win, but yeah.
Yeah. So, we had the King of the Ring that we talked about, where I left in disgust and went and sat in the car. That is not the only time that I did that on a wrestling trip that we did. So there was also the ECW Fan Con that we had went to, and I think Paula went with us on this one. I think she was, because it was the one where the first
was this
night,
one in Bronx?
Yes, Queens.
Yeah.
Queens. And yeah, they had the show that, so we drive to Philadelphia, then we take a bus with wrestling fans to Queens for the show. And this one, I think Raven versus Sandman was probably like the main event, so I might have actually made it to the end.
Yeah, beer guys, you had some beer tossed on you by Sandman.
Yes.
Yeah, splattered on you, not tossed, yes. Splattered.
Maybe it was maybe it was like when he opened the can and it went everywhere. Maybe it was when he spit it out. I don't know, but either way, it got on me, and so I left in disgust.
My understanding is he doesn't do that part of his shtick now because he's gone completely sober.
I don't care.
Yeah, I just thought
I don't care.
I wasn't trying to be persuasive. I was just
it is what it is. I still hold a grudge for him getting the beer on me that time. And
did you ever have to work with him?
He came in one time, and even worse than spilling beer onto me, I pick him up from the Louisville airport, and he was gonna wrestle. I think it was Pondo, and so I pick him up, and I'm trying to drive him to I don't know if it was to the hotel or to the building. It might have just been to the building. and you know, he's all hunched over and bent, and I can't tell what he's doing. And I hear like a bunch of like tinfoil rustling noises, and I'm trying to drive down the interstate, and the next thing I know, he's smoking a joint,
Oh,
and somehow he had like put it in his pant, put it in his underwear or something, and had gotten through security with it. And it's pre 9/11. By I, th- I think it might have been maybe maybe he came in. I don't know if he came in 2000 or 2001, but it was like before 9/11 and heightened security. So he had gotten the weed through the airport security, and all of a sudden he's just smoking a joint in my vehicle, and I'm like, no, absolutely not. Put that out right now. Not not around me. And so he
how'd
was
that
upset.
go?
He wasn't very happy about it, but he was like, "Oh, sorry, dude. I didn't know you were a killjoy." And I'm like, "Well, you could at least fucking ask. You
Yeah.
know, did you see me smoking anything in my damn fucking car? You don't just get in somebody's car and light up a fucking joint out of nowhere." But I digress. And then he gets to the building and he's high on whatever and drunk off his ass and just going up to everybody. What's your finish? And they'd tell him what the finish was, and he's like, no, no, that's stupid, don't do that, do this. And
That's odd.
and then Ian's going, you don't even know my storylines, you don't know what's going on, you've never been here, you've never seen my product, don't try to change my finishes. Well, I'm just trying to do things better. And he's like, just leave my guys alone, all right, just get and Bull couldn't stand him. Bull wanted to kill him from, I guess, like their time in ECW together. He didn't like how Sandman had stiffed him with the cane or something. So, like, Bull couldn't stand him. I couldn't stand him. I didn't want anything to do with him. I made somebody else take him back to the airport and the hotel after the show. I was
Bull
like,
gets upset if people stiff him.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay.
So, you know, uh, so I'm not a
Seems a
Sandman
little
fan.
double. Seems a little like a double standard, maybe, but
If Bull might end up listening to this somehow, so I'm going to leave out of that conversation. Bull is a saint. He's a peach. Do not come and kick my ass. Not going to happen. But yeah, I do not care for Sandman one bit. If he's cleaned himself up and not the degenerate jerk that he was 25 years ago, great for him. Glad to hear it, but I don't care. What I can't. It's too blurry.
hear that. I was
Is
playing
that?
Eruption.
Oh, don't. Yeah, don't. I'd run away from the computer. But you know, so there was that. Um, I have done the lead during the TPI that ICP was at. I went and sat in the car while they were singing, and I ended up missing Cash Flow, knocking out the Juggalo that had tried to get into the ring. Um, and then the last two
You're saying
AEW shows.
exciting things happen when Fannin leaves the show.
Evidently,
Yeah.
evidently. I walked out and left the last two AEW shows that I went to and sat in the car while Chris stayed and behind and watched to the end. But
Why the first one?
the first one was that was the pay-per-view right before COVID hit, and it was I lasted until I think it ended up being like the semi-main event, and was like Orange Cassidy versus Pac or Pac or however it's pronounced.
Right. I thought it was
And
Orange Cassidy's fault the second time.
it was,
Okay.
Both times. Both times.
You know he's actually a really good worker now, right?
I People try to tell me that and I don't give a shit. The second you stand in front of somebody with your hands in your pocket and they don't fucking murder you on the spot, I'm stopping watching because it's dumb. It's
And
absolutely
he
dumb.
has really good chemistry with Pac or Pac. I don't know which way it is either, to be honest with you. They do some really good stuff together.
Yeah, but I don't.
But I digress. There's no use in us arguing about something that
Yeah,
you will never.
I
Yeah,
don't give a fuck.
yeah.
You could He could be the greatest wrestler on the face of God's green earth, but that gimmick, fuck that. I ain't watching.
It's a mind game thing that he only does for a few seconds, and then he usually gets his comeuppance.
Okay,
I mean, I'm sure there are people who.
he should literally be dead.
I mean, Adrian Street used to prance around the ring. I mean, it's people have.
Okay, that's fine. Prance around the ring all you want. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
But if you stand in front of your fucking opponent with your hands in your pocket and he does not murder you, then I hate you. I hate your opponent. I hate the entire fucking show because they're all fucking morons. Watch what happens week to week. You know, maybe the first time he does it, I can see being shocked and being like, oh, what's going on? What? After the second time he's done it in whatever federation he's with,
Should have
you're
kind of
all
caught on. Yeah.
you're all fucking idiots for having never watched it before and knowing that, hey, you better take advantage of this situation and fucking murder him. Because had that happened in a 1997 IWA show, what would have happened to that wrestler?
The locker room would have emptied.
Exactly. Roland Hard had a locker room emptied on him because he threw a love tap chair shot in the
Is that right? I didn't realize that.
You were at that show.
Okay.
It was before. It was when we were in the crowd. It was one of the debuts of because he was like Tornado Taz or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And he did a love tap with the chair. Entire dressing room comes out, it beats the dog shit out of him, and then he like comes back as rolling hard, and actually swinging a chair after that. So yeah, if I see something I don't let and people are like, well, fast forward. It's not my job to fast forward past shit. It's their job to give me something to watch. And I'm not about to, the last fight I got into on the internet with somebody was because they posted like a 2 hour long compilation of battle royal stuff. And 5 minutes of it was a bunkhouse stampede that had never been released before. And I posted and said, somebody tell me the exact time that bunkhouse stampede's at, because I'm not about to go hunting for it. And they were like, you lazy son of a bitch, all you got to do is hit a button a couple of times. And I'm like, it's not my job to fast forward through an hour and 50 minutes of something to find 5 minutes of something I want to watch. Give me the 5 minutes. This is an instantaneous gratification world that we live in now. I'm not fast forwarding forever to hunt for something that I may or may not like when I finally get there. So, that's just how that I am. And
so let me throw it around on you though. You asked about some of your quirks and things. How was living in the John's basement back then?
It had its
Was it
moments.
cozy accommodations or not?
I mean, it was cozy enough accommodations. The basement was big enough for me, and it gave me enough me time where I could, when I got done being social, I could go downstairs. It was a unique experience because of all the babysitting I ended up doing for Adam. And, as you know, I am not all that fond of children. And so it was a unique experience to be in the situation of, watching Adam. And one of the first times that I watched him, and it will stick with me to the end of time, was, buckling him into the back seat. And he had outaged being in a car seat. So I'm not sure exactly how old he was around that time. I can't remember now, but I buckle him into the back seat and I'm driving, and then I look over look in the rear view mirror, and he's bent completely forward, folded in half, and just limp and I thought he was dead. I was like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And I pull the car over and I go back, and he's just sleeping. But he would fall.
I
He
don't
would
remember
fall
this at
asleep.
all.
He would fall asleep every single time I'd put him in that back seat and buckle him in. He'd fall asleep and just completely fall forward. And I would freak out and be like, "Oh my God, how am I going to explain bringing their child back dead? You know, I, something with the seatbelt? I don't know what happened. Oh my God."
It's weird because Adam and his fiancee Lainey have just had a child, so I'm now a grandfather for the first time. The baby's almost 2 months old. We're going to go see them this weekend. Um, but I had told Adam recently that whenever he had trouble sleeping, all we had to do was take him on a short car ride and he would fall asleep. So that's something that I guess carried over from his baby stage to the toddler stage and that you experienced firsthand in a very freaky way.
It freaked me out. I was scared to death. I was like, "Am I going to have to throw this kid in a ditch and drive off to Canada and never come back?"
That child that was in your seat now is 31 years old.
I,
And
I
do,
am not that old.
do,
I am not that old. All
do you
right.
remember us convincing him that Ian Rotten was secretly the Ultimo Dragon?
That I don't remember.
Okay, okay. We
That
did.
I don't remember.
I don't
Uh,
know why we decided to do that, but he bought it. So he also thought he went to a Bulls game with you. So
yeah, that one was weird because I've only been to two Bulls games as a fan, and then the season that I worked for them selling 50-50 raffle tickets, and I never watched 1 second of a game the entire season that I worked for them. I just stayed out on the concourse selling 50-50 tickets, and then when it was time for the 50-50 raffle to cut off, I just turned in the machines, grabbed my stuff, and went home.
so I
Uh,
guess that's a good trivia question. What does the Chicago Bulls and IWA have in common? They both often had 50-50 raffles.
well,
And
yeah,
they both had you work for them.
and they both had me work for them, and they, I think the Bulls actually, you know, didn't didn't pay, and they didn't pay in hot dogs and nachos and handshakes, but
When I listened to the Kickboxer podcast on the way home today, I felt like at some point you've corrected the record in terms of what you and Ben talked about, in terms of how we all got kind of started um, messing around working with IWA. Because you're right, you were right in that podcast in that it started from me commenting on the hotline and getting angry calls from Ian Rotten, which is kind of bizarre when you think about it. Um, at talking to me about his booking. So that's how it all started.
yeah, that was what I was about to get into next was
I knew that.
how it started with we had went to we had went to that ECW fan con in 96, and then ended up on AOL Grandstand finding that he was actually running shows in Louisville, which wasn't all that far from where we were going to school there in Lexington, and started going to the shows. And what made you to decide that you were going to I know leave the messages saying, because believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, those shows were drawing 500 people a week at the time.
Yeah.
I know people that you know came to know
Well, no
IWA
video
after,
exists, so we can
and
say
no
they drew
video,
2,000.
right? But they had a packed house
They really
every
did.
single week
Yeah.
at the Kmart building. And so we would have to like, if you wanted front row, you had to call the hotline and put in your reservation to have your tickets held, or else you were not going to have front row when you got there. You may not even have the first 3 or 4. You may have been stuck in the
The
bleachers.
bleachers, yeah.
So I get calling the hotline and being like, hey, save me 3, save me 4, save me 5. However, if Paula was going, if your buddy Richard was going, or if your nephew, or is it nephew or cousin Chris?
Nephew Chris, yeah.
Nephew Chris. It's like, I can see calling that, but what made you decide that you were going to go ahead and critique the booking, even though it was almost exact, following along the feud at the same time in ECW, where they were doing the ex-wife
Respect.
and child and
Yeah.
everything with Ox and Pondo that they were doing with Raven Sandman, and then they were doing the exact same thing with Kickboxer and Tarek. That was happening storyline wise with Van Dam and Sabu, is back and forth, and respect, same kind of using the same kind of stips. I think Kickboxer might have sort of misunderstood my question, when I was bringing that up and saying that, they were trying to pattern themselves after those two, where what we were pointing out was just the booking that Ian was doing with the stipulations and carrying the storyline was mirroring what was
Yeah,
happening
yeah.
with
I
that.
I would never dare to criticize anything the kickboxer did because his work was exquisite, and like you said in the podcast, him versus Tarek is what got us to return over and over and over again. It was you're right, and you also were right about no match was like the other, and they somehow have worked together a billion times and still, well, not still, but could put together a fluid, emotional, fun match that wasn't the same. But yeah, what possessed me to leave a comment about what we'd seen? I was in my mid 20s and full of crap and thought I knew everything, I guess. I don't really have a good answer to that. That was a strange thing to do. It wasn't like there were message boards at the time, though, to talk about stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
AOL Grandstand was the only thing, and
yeah. Um, that's an excellent question. Um, the follow-up question is what possessed, Ian to then call
right,
and confront me.
that's an even bigger question. Like, what would
Yeah,
possess?
confront me about those comments and argue that it really wasn't. And then, like you said, the conversations with him would last eons. So, which at the time I thought was really damn cool. I thought, I mean, there are times I was on the phone with him and Axel at the same time, and talking. You would learn a lot and hear a lot, and it was pretty exciting and interesting for me at the time. So, but yeah, it was odd because obviously, Ian doesn't really love getting criticism, so he decided to call and follow up on said criticism, and that's kind of how the friendship started, um, and then somewhere along the course of getting to know him and us, developing friendships with him, I had the brainchild of bringing IWA Mid South Pro Wrestling to Lexington, Kentucky, which had been pro wrestling deprived aside from um, WWF/E coming to town. I don't think this was in any loop at all for NWA that I recall. Um, and of course, when you started talking and trying to build a crowd for a show in Lexington, Kentucky, you realized that everybody that lived in the town had a story about knowing, living next to, or hanging out with Randy Macho Man Savage. It's incredible how many, and I'm not saying they're embellished, but it's pretty phenomenal how many people say they were best buds with Randy Savage.
Well,
So,
everybody lived right down the street. That was what
yeah.
we heard. I used to live right down the street, and we would go. how long was this fucking street that everybody lived on it? Whenever we would be flyering and someone would actually look at the flyer, it was all, I used to live right down the street from Randy Savage. And amazing. There must have been one road in all of Lexington.
So, me and Ian worked out an agreement, started laying out the groundwork for the card. I don't know how we ended up, I don't know who had the brain stroke or brainstorm that got Ben involved, but I thought it was a good idea. He really was not liked on the UK campus because of the inflammatory writing he did. And we got, I mean, and you showed the cool article that they wrote, even though they got a few things wrong. So we got some good press out of it. We did some radio shows too, and we had a place to buy tickets at the local comic book shop, and yeah, I thought we did a lot of good things. Thought we had a decent house the first couple shows we had in Lexington. Thought we were building something good, and then they weren't happy with the cleanup after one of the shows, and probably heard about the hardcore nature of the show and kicked us. I don't remember how many we had at the Armory. Was it three or four?
I don't know. And when you go back to like that cage match website that's got like results and everything, they all just say Lexington. So they don't even, I know like one of the, like Ben was like, one of the shows was actually in Versailles. And I knew that it was like Versailles or Georgetown that we
Yeah.
had done a show in, and I couldn't remember,
Yeah, it's
but
definitely
like
for sales in the
every, every
barn.
everything was labeled as, just Lexington.
I
Didn't
got
really.
so much I got so much crap because I was the person who found the venues. And I got so much crap for the barn. I got so much crap for A1A. The thing at the bar in downtown Lexington, had it not been in the second floor, would have been great. But yeah, I didn't fully ponder logistics when I booked that, and got a lot of crap for it, and understandably so. The other thing about that was, if I recall correctly, it was a low ceiling, so the guys couldn't do much off the top rope, and I was terrified that the weight of the ring and the crowd, the floor between the second floor and the first floor did not look sturdy to me. I
No.
was terrified of that thing collapsing. And if I recall correctly, I was on the first floor a couple times while the show was going on, and I swear it looked like it was like moving and stuff. So that was one of the things I was most terrified about that. But the general prospect of having a show at one of the downtown bars was a good idea. It was just poor in specificity. So, where else do we have shows? Is that it? The barn, A1A, the
um
armory.
there was a fan commented on the YouTube video that said he went to all of the Lexington shows, and he brought up that there was one show. I think he said it was the last show that happened in the Lexington area was at the like Continental Inn
Oh
Hotel.
yeah, we had at least two at the Continental Inn, at least two, and it was there that I had my first encounters with a couple of the old Memphis guys. I know Dutch Mantel was there. Tracy may have been there. I don't remember for sure, but I know it was the first time seeing and meeting Dutch Mantel for the first time. Which, as someone who grew up watching Memphis wrestling, to me that was pretty cool. So yeah, Continental Inn. I don't think we had very good house at those. We had moved around too much. Um, Probably wasn't as dedicated to promoting the shows as we needed to. I quickly realized that no matter how many people we had in the crowd, I wasn't going to make any money. Um, I mean, and I think Ben alluded to, I think I did get something for the second show, but it's weird because I mean, we would have two or three hundred, attendees, and then we actually sold concessions too. And the money always ran out somehow. No
Yep.
matter how many we had in the gate. So yeah, it's amazing how that happened, and I'm sure that there are others like yourself or many wrestlers who feel much the same way when dealing with Mr.
Well,
Rodman.
yeah, and I mean, it was every show, it'd be, oh shit, I waited too long to get this airplane ticket. Now the price is tripled from when I booked the guy. The airline ticket was this much. Can I put it on your credit card?
If I had it,
And and
yeah.
then you're the first person I pay. As soon, before I do anything, I'm going to pay you the money for this, before I pay anybody else. And then, every time it happened, there'd be 40 goddamn people in the audience, and there'd be 45 people on the damn show because he would just book everybody. And then, so I'm going, just make sure they get something. Make sure these guys get paid. And so I wouldn't take the money. And then it wouldn't surprise me if he then went and told all of them, well, Jim got all the money because, I had to pay him for this airplane ticket.
If I
And,
had it
and,
to
and
do
then,
over, once again, I was older to be a college student when we got involved, but also still young in general in my mid to upper 20s and inexperienced. If I had it to do over, which I mean, there's no way I'd do something like that right now, I definitely would have. I would have mandated that I controlled the money for the shows I co-promoted. I also would probably look to have the license for the show in our name, my name, whatever. There's no way I would have let like that someone on the show to control the purse strings. So yeah, yeah, that
well,
was a huge mistake. I honestly believe there were profits at least the first 2 to 3 shows, and it just went to Ian slash Caesars probably. So, one question about the Kmart building I had when I was listening to you in Kickboxer. Do I remember correctly that the tables were used in bumps were just kind of like stolen from the bingo hall?
that is the rumor.
Okay.
I mean, we were not personally involved in those
No,
shows.
I don't remember that at all. But
So,
I don't remember being part of doing that.
I don't have firsthand knowledge, but I have heard from plenty of people that it would be, let's take 2 tables from the bingo side and bring them on over to break in. It's what I've heard, rumor and innuendo only. I have no firsthand knowledge.
Was the first cage match in IWA the one in which you got attacked by Bull? Was that the week the cage was actually built, or was there something before then?
I That was the week that cage was built. I don't know. I can't remember if there was ever a cage match before that. So I don't want to say it was the first I can recall, but I know that we had just built it because I was building it.
Yeah,
I was helping build it like that week leading up to it. And I
it got
remember
done at the last minute, right?
everything in IWA got done at the last minute. But yeah, it got done like we were like Mullet Man Danny was doing most of it, but I'm there helping out, and I just remember that they would play they had music playing to help pass the time, and I think it was Creed,
My Own Prison,
My Own Prison, and they're like singing
Cage of
Building
Steel.
My Own Prison, and so like all
It
week
actually has the line "Cage made of steel" in the yeah.
right, and building my own prison, and I'm literally building my own prison made that I'm going to die in later that week, and I'm like, kind of fitting that this is the song that is
My
serenading me while I'm
recollection,
killing.
my recollection is that Creed actually played in Louisville that weekend, but I may be just completely fabricating that.
I mean, it could possibly have been that case. I mean, maybe that's why they were playing it so much on the radio. But of course, the hit songs of the time they would play into the ground anyway. But yeah, it was like every 2 hours you could hear, and we would be taking. It took forever to build that goddamn cage, and then I think it might have gotten used maybe twice, and
Where does an
that
indie
was it.
fed like store a cage after they get done with it?
Well, that's
I
the
mean,
thing. Yeah,
Ian was living in a trailer.
right. And I mean, he got kicked out of the Kmart building, shortly after that, and so forever it just sat leaning up against the wall in the back of that building, long after we were gone. Uh, Even like we're running the Total Eclipse Teen Club across the street, and we could have came over. I mean, the cage never would have fit in the teen club, but we could have like just walked across the street, grabbed the cage, and carried it over because it was like still sitting there um, for the longest time.
I remember doing a run-in on you at the teen club, and the only thing I think there was an infamous backstage fight that night, but maybe
Yes,
I'm misremembering. But then I also remember when I did my run-in on you, I remember you told me to stiffen up. I remember that.
yeah. So we had done the you had gotten out, um, and had stopped doing the Lexington shows. You stopped coming to IWA for a while. That was around the time that I had officially gotten the promoter's license and gotten involved. Told that story on episode 1 with Ben Rich. Go back and listen to it there if you want more background on it. But I was the one that got the promoter's license, became promoting the shows. We moved to the Total Eclipse Teen Club. The state of Kentucky was still after us, right and left, right and left, right and left, trying to get rid of us, trying to get rid of us. Me and Ian had to go in front of the commission countless times, and those were the biggest fucking bozos on the face of God's green earth, run by Jack Kearns, who was the biggest hypocrite and, you know, dead now, rest in hell. I'll see him there eventually. Um, he would let WWF get away with the same shit that he was screaming at us about. And then he'd come and yell at us about duct tape on the canvas in the ring. Just anything that he could put his hands on to try to get rid of us. But I remember we did a flaming table spot and at the Kmart building, and he comes in and he's like, this isn't allowed. You can't do this. You can't put lighter fluid on a table. And Ian's like, it was water. And Jack Kearns was like, what? And he's like, it was all an illusion. And he was like, really? And he's like, yeah, it was just all an illusion. It was water. And so we convinced this man that we set water on fire. And he was like, okay, well, don't do it again. But I mean, that's the kind of people that they had running this fucking commission in the state of Kentucky. And, a funny story about the commission. So, I mean, you knew my grandmother.
Yeah.
If I didn't check in with her at least once every other day, she would think I was dead.
Right.
And she would just be like worried to death about me. So I had like gone a week without talking to her. And I mean, wasn't doing it on purpose, just, life catches up with you, busy with the shows and everything. Just never called her. So instead of calling my number, instead of calling my apartment and like leaving a voicemail saying, hey, are you alive? Are you dead in a ditch somewhere? Please let me know what's going on. She looks all over the house. And for some reason, while I was home, I had to like call the commission about something. And so I had the number written down. So she calls the Kentucky State Athletic Commission, talks to Jack Kearns, the commissioner of the Athletic Commission, asking if he knows if I'm okay and if he's heard from me recently because she's worried to death about me. So then I get a phone call from Jack Kearns, and he's laughing, and he's like, "You might want to call your grandmother, young man. She's very worried about you." And I'm
That
like,
has to be like the most endearing interaction you had with him.
it was, because the rest of them was like, "You're just a
Yeah.
fucking moron." So yeah, you had stopped coming to shows, um, and then we were doing this thing where you would come back, and yeah, you were gonna attack me. I think you were gonna clothesline me or something in the ring, um, and I told you, be stiff with it. So you went out and you beat me up, and it was going to lead to where we were going to go into a feud and do something. But I can't even remember what ended up happening.
Me neither. I
Um,
don't remember if I just I don't know. I don't remember if I bailed, if the teen club shows went away,
well, the
or
Teen
if
Club shows went away shortly after that. There
that may be what happened.
that night they had lasted a little while longer
Now,
than that, so
was
I'm not.
that not the night of the was it Corporal and Ox that got into the
Yes,
fight? Wasn't that night too?
yes, that was the night that Corporal and Ox got into it. That was right.
One of them got whooped bad, and I'm thinking Corporal whipped Ox, right?
Oh, Corporal beat Ox Harley's ass.
Yeah, yeah.
It was bad. It was right after Ian and Corporal had done a no rope barbed wire match in Salem, Indiana. Um, that was the night that the barbed wire nicked Corporal's temple and cut him real bad. But it was no rope salt barbed wire, barbed wire match, and he gets cut by the bar, or it was either the barbed wire nicked him or they did something with glass and the glass bounced back up and cut him. Something happened where it got him right on like the temple and cut him real bad. And he almost bled out. We got him to the hospital. They didn't clean the wound for some reason. So when they were just in a hurry to stitch him back up to get
The bleeding stopped.
the bleeding stopped, and so they stitched it up with salt still in there. So he ended up like getting like a pretty bad aneurysm from it, and he was pretty messed up. And if that had happened today, he'd be a billionaire right now from the lawsuit. But in 1998 or whenever it was, yeah, he never tried to sue. It didn't get anything out of it. But anyway, he was really fucked up from this. So this was like his first match back from that injury, and he's wrestling Ox. And he tells Ox before they go out there, he's like, be careful of my wound. I'm still healing up here. Don't do whatever the hell you want. Just don't hit me, where I had my surgery. And Ox being Ox, goes out there and like hits him with the cane right in the spot that he's got the scar and he's all fucked up. And so like Corporal gets all pissed. They somehow finish the match. I can't remember what the finish was, but they get into the back and there was like pool tables and everything in the locker room area where we were at in this teen club. And Corporal's screaming at Ox, and Ox is like, I said I was sorry. And Ian
Wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
and Ian being Ian is like, fuck this. You two are going to settle this like men. Stop talking about it and get it out. Fight it out. Get it over with. This is going to be over. And he's like, we're going to move these pool tables out of the way, and you two are going to finish this like men. So like everybody pushes the pool tables and makes room. And so Ox stands up and he puts up his fists, and Corporal goes, boom, 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 boom. And Ox sits down and says, you whooped my ass. I'm done. And that was like the fight. I mean, Corporal, it was like one of those arcade games where like you go to like the theme parks and they'd have the boxing match where they had like you'd put your hand into the handles and you'd have to, Corporal hit him like 12 times in 4 seconds. And Ox sat back down. He's like, "You whooped my ass. I'm done." Well, I don't think it was as violent as when Flash Flanagan in Ox got into it.
Do you
It's
have on your list to cover? And we're going. It's been an hour and 45 minutes. And I'm sorry to cut you off. Do you have anything else on your list about Flash Flanagan?
no, I wasn't going to cover that.
Okay, I don't know if you remember. Surely you do. There was a point in time where Ian had secured taking over a time slot
Yes,
on TV from some other company, and I cannot remember the tag team
the
that.
Shooting Stars.
Yes, Shooting Stars. Who was in that? Do you remember?
I don't know their names. I just remember them as the
But
Shooting
they, on
Stars.
their show, had been talking crap about Flash Flanagan for some reason for weeks, even though he wasn't on
Flash
the show.
quit.
Huh?
Flash was working for them. They had like Mike Samples had a TV show or something, and they took over the TV time slot from Mike Samples. And then they were gonna Flash had like worked for them, but then Ian was like, if you work for them, you can't work for me. And Flash chose us. So Flash quit, came to work for us exclusively. So they started saying on the TV show that they retired Flash Flanagan, that
He's
Flash
bagging
Flanagan
groceries.
bagging groceries as his job now. But their show, like after Flash left, nobody was going to their show. They were going to close up shop, go out of business. So Ian worked out a deal to take over the TV time slot that they owned.
And then they made an appearance at the Kmart building, was in the middle
Right.
of the ring. For some reason, that it must have been the middle of summer, the garage door was open because I was standing over by the garage door and had become more involved with IWA at the time. So I was, it wasn't anything official. It was before, obviously, you kind of took over in that role. But I was intimately involved in the discussion to get the time slot and get all that worked out, along with Ian, and we were really excited about it. And then the Shooting Stars are doing a promo or whatever in the middle of it, or maybe they were supposed to start
No,
a match.
they were in the crowd.
Oh, really?
Flash was in the ring because somebody just posted this video on like TikTok or something, and I had to put like because people were like, "Oh, that IWA show where they just attack fans for no reason," and I had to comment on it and go, "Those weren't fans;
Yeah,
those were wrestlers in the crowd, and it was an
yeah,
angle that got out of hand."
yeah. And Flash
And
just
correct
chased
everybody,
them out the
right?
door.
Because they like Flash is in the ring, and he told Ian that he would be fine because the Shooting Stars were supposed to come in and work for us. That was like part of the deal for them giving us the TV time slot was that they were going to be on the shows and get to work and still be on said TV show. And so they're in the crowd and they're running their mouth and mocking Flash while he's wrestling. And Flash just said, fuck it, jumped out of the ring and started whooping their ass in the crowd. And they ran out the door and kept running and never came back and, didn't give us the time slot.
I remember as he went back to the locker room, Flash walked past me and was like, "I'm sorry, Les." I'm like, what just happened?
But I mean, that perfectly encapsulates IWA Mid South. Every time there was a chance to take it to the next level, a chance to succeed, something crazy happened that just blew it all to hell. Flash Flanagan just can't hold his temper and beats the shit out of the Shooting Stars, and we lose our TV deal before we even had it. I get an opportunity to do a show at my high school that should have had 3,500 people.
Massive snowstorm.
A foot of snow falls, and you barely get enough to cover the costs for Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero, and it's just on and on and on. And like every time that you would think that okay, this is where we can turn the corner, something crazy like that would happen and just blow it all to hell. And nuts to think of. But But yeah,
Yeah.
that was right around the time. And so the next, going back to that story of the Ox Harley Corporal Robinson fight, the next week, Corporal had like told all the his friends that were in the crowd what had happened. So it was like Brent Blades' crew that he had told what had happened to. So then the next week in the teen club, when Ox Harley came out, they chanted throughout his match, Corporal Robinson kicked your ass, doo-dah, doo-dah. Corporal
Wow.
Robinson kicked your ass all the doo-dah day. And after that match, the next week, Ox went into the back, packed up his bag, said, Ian, I quit, and left. And that was like the end of Ox Harley.
Was that
Um,
the end of Ox Harley for good, or did he come back at some point?
he might have come back. I think but he quit at that point and was gone for quite a while.
I'm trying to
He
remember it, and I don't think you were there. And it's strange because I've got it narrowed down to one of these two guys, and they couldn't be much more different physically. But one of those two, Corporal Ox, had a real bad incident also at an Indiana show with light tubes where they not only were super bloodied, but they had inhaled a lot of that stuff that comes out when you pop the bad light tubes over each other. And he was like vomiting in the back, and I can't remember who it was now, which makes it a pretty bad story because I can't tell you who it was or what happened. But anyway, go ahead.
I'm not sure on that, but yeah, you ended up not coming back after that night at the Total Eclipse Teen Club. Shortly after that was when uh, armed state troopers came and shut down IWA at the Total Eclipse Teen Club.
I did
Uh,
not know that happened.
Ian was in Germany, I think it was. He was overseas. I think it was Germany wrestling. Um, so I was running the show, and it was early in the day, and we had like just gotten the U-Haul truck pulled up with the ring in there, and we had started to set up the ring, and all of a sudden, like five Kentucky State troopers showed up, and they all had 12 gauge shotguns, and they came in, and like Bull was like the booker for the show, and like me and Patty were supposed to like pay everybody, um whatever that amounted to. um but like these troopers came, and they had their 12 gauge shotguns pointed, and Jack Kearns pulled up, and like two or
Oh
three
my
commissioners
goodness.
got out, and they came up with paperwork and slapped it on and said, your promoter's license in the state of Kentucky is hereby revoked, um, because of failure to pay your taxes on the gate. And that was like a setup, because at the time we were only getting like 40, 50 people a week at these shows. So like the tax was like $10,
Right.
that we owed on these ticket sales for these shows. And Ian being Ian was like, hey, can we just like run 5, 6 shows and then send you a check for all the money at one time, so we're not just sending you a $10 money order every week? And Jack Kern said, yeah, that's fine, do it that way, we'll accept that. So they went like a month without sending the taxes from the Total Eclipse Teen Club, and so they showed up with a bunch of 12 gauge shotguns, and we're like, you're putting that ring back into the truck and you're leaving. And we're like, well, we can't leave. We at least got to be here to tell people that there's no show and why there's no show. So one cop stayed with us to make sure that we didn't put the ring back into the building. And, and Patty was like freaking out, going, oh my God, John's going to kill me. John's going to kill me. And, and we're like, well, what can you do? And of course it's like 1998. So
Yeah.
you can't just send an email. You can't, text. You can't. So I'm not even sure like how long it was before Ian realized that we were thrown out of the state of the Kentucky that night.
Was that the final non-show in Kentucky, or
That
was
was
the
the
license reinstated for you at some point?
never got it reinstated. I wouldn't have been able to because I wouldn't have been able to get bonded again from the they revoked my bond, insurance bond, and took the tax money from that instead of letting us pay it. And so I never would have been able to get bonded again. He would have had to find another. He would have had to find another mark to agree to promote for him, and so that it never happened. Never returned to the
Before
state of Kentucky.
before getting in the ring with you, I did have a couple spots where I took bumps. I remember one time I got into something with Ian and was trying to strip him of the title. You told a story that was similar to this about him. He was going to go with the hood or whatever. But this was, I think, before that. And I remember he threw me over the top rope. I was trying to get back in, and then Harry Palmer like dropped kicked me to where I tumbled to the floor again. And then when I finally did get back in the ring, Ian threw the title belt and it bounced off my bald head. I remember that. That was fun. But I don't think I ever took any moves though. I mean, I guess I took a drop kick, but
Okay.
I don't think I took any actual moves though.
All right. Well, we're coming up on 2 hours here. I don't really want to go. There's still a lot we could talk about. Um, I keep telling everybody, you can always revisit and talk more.
Yeah, we can
My
get back together, maybe actually get me, you, and Ben all together.
right. And so, um, before we end this one, do you have any regrets about getting involved, and do you miss it at all?
No, I don't really have any regrets about getting involved. That was fun. It was a learning experience. The phone conversations were pretty cool, very long. I remember one time I had Rob Van Dam's phone number, which I thought was pretty cool. Um, I would do a billion things different for it to something like that to pop up right now, but I don't have any regrets about getting involved. Um, and I stand by the fact that we were building something good in Lexington. The shows were outstanding, I thought, and the crowds were solid. And whatever I'm going to say they, not we, because I don't feel like maybe I should have been more hands-on since the building was in my name. They argued that we didn't do a good enough job cleaning up after probably a bloody match or whatever. So maybe that's my fault, But yeah, I wish if we had been able to continue at the Armory, um, I think we would have been able to continue to build the city a little bit.
Okay. Well, it definitely gives us something to think about of what might have been, and you know, uh, gives us definitely ground to have another episode to go over more in the future. To wrap this up, you had mentioned what you're up to now with the Demon Deacon Digest. Those of us watching on YouTube can see that with your name up there in the corner. Do you want to tell people how they can follow you on social media and how they can be involved in following Wake Forest sports if that's something they want to do?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Les_Johns. That's LES_JOHNS. Um, I'm the sports writer for I cover Wake Forest athletics. Um, First year head coach Jake Dickert is doing some good things in football, and it's been an exciting season so far. They had top five ranked Georgia Tech basically beaten, if not for a offsides call missed in the final 2 minutes, and then they won at Virginia Tech, and then they had a last second victory this last week to win 13. They should be like 5-1 right now. And then of course I went and saw Steve Forbes and the basketball team 2 nights ago in the exhibition. I think they're going to be pretty darn good too. So I think it's going to be an exciting year to be a Demon Deacon fan, so jump on board. My site is demondeacondigest.com. It's in the 24/7 Sports Network. And then I also do some writing directly for the school at the Deacon Sports Extra. So a lot of stuff there. I don't tweet a lot about wrestling, but I may try to do so more in the future. I've got a friend who runs and owns High Spots, Michael, and I've been lucky enough to meet Swerve Strickland within the last year, for instance, and a super good guy. And so yeah, Michael takes good care of me at times. Is a real good friend.
Okay, well, yeah, you've mentioned your friendship with him and some of the things that he's been able to give you the opportunity to do and people to meet. And
Yeah, he
you
sent
know,
me a video from Okada on my birthday, which I thought was pretty cool. So
yeah, so it's great to have those kind of friends, and it's been great to catch up with you over the last couple of hours and talk about some of our old memories. And like to thank you for that time. And I'm going to let you get out of here so you can get a little bit of rest before you drive for several hours, grandpa, to
yeah,
go and see that grandchild. Tell tell Adam that I said hello, and you know thank him for those scares he gave me by collapsing over in the back seat of my car and making me think that he
I
was
will
scared.
definitely tell him that story. So
All right. Well, this wraps up another edition of Fannin's Flashbacks. Again, I'd like to thank Les Johns for joining me today. Remember to check out his Demon Deacon Digest at the 24/7 Sports site to follow him. And as he said, Les underscore Johns on Twitter. Send him any of your memories that you may have of Ian Rotten throwing him over the top rope and Harry Palmer drop kicking him if you were at those shows. Remember to check out the YouTube channel, YouTube/Sports Fannin for IWA clips and matches involving me and along with these podcasts. When you get to that YouTube channel, make sure that you start off by clicking the like button and hit subscribe. Check out brokenmerchtable.com for t-shirts of Nick Manawa, Jess B's Knees, Mean Mitch Page, Rolling Hard, and yours truly, Jim Fannin. You can follow me on Twitter at jfannin73, TikTok at jim.jj.fannin, and on Instagram at IWA Fannin73. Nothing like having three different handles on all those social media sites. But we'll see you next time on episode 5 of Fannin's Flashbacks. So let it be written. So let it be done. Good day.